In this video, I'm going to explain what the walking code is, because it's a powerful system that you can use to help improve both your posture and your walking technique. And it's what I primarily talk about on this channel. The walking code is a system that I created based on my analysis of the 8 fundamental energies of Tai Chi, which are the foundation of Tai Chi movement and are supposed to explain how we perform all of the motions in Tai Chi. But in Tai Chi theory, the description of these energies is done in a vague and metaphorical way that doesn't translate very well to our modern understanding of anatomy. So by analyzing the Tai Chi trigrams, these 8 energies, but putting it in the context of the anatomy that we know in modern medicine and also in applications other than Tai Chi, I am translating these 8 energies in a way that you can use and adopt to help improve all of the types of movement that you may be doing in your life, whether it's you're walking, whether you're doing dance, or whether you're practicing Tai Chi. So let's look at where the walking code or these 8 energies come from. So let's think about human locomotion or walking on 2 legs. Humans are the only existing creatures who can walk on 2 legs. And it's one of the defining elements of what it is to be a human. Evolutionarily speaking, walking on 2 legs is one of the things that allowed the advancement of human evolution, because it took the motions of locomotion, which many other or most other animals use a great portion of their brain dedicated to performing movement activities. And for humans, it compartmentalized this locomotion function into a smaller, more reflexive portion of the brain, and then allowed our cerebrum, our cognitive portion of the brain, to grow and expand separately and focus on all of the knowledge and other skills that have become representative of humanity. While our reflexive movements are performed using the more reflexive portion of the brain connected to our spinal cord and our spinal reflexes. Now, humans have a very remarkable, complex spectrum of movements that we can perform. So how can this be done in a simple or relatively simple reflexive format? Well, what it is that our complex rotation of our waist muscles, our hip muscles, our knee muscles, our ankle muscles that keep us in balance and allow us to stand up walking on 2 legs without thinking about it, all of this complex system of movement can be broken down into 8 simple or relatively simple patterns of movement. And when you think about it this way, all of the complex stuff we do, maybe in gymnastics, playing football, walking uphill, walking downhill, squatting, doing anything that we do on a routine basis, you can base all of this off of 8 relatively simple patterns that your brain on a reflexive basis needs to recognize. Those patterns are the code. 8 fundamental patterns of movement, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So they're based on the fact that we have 3 elements of our core, and these 3 elements move in conjunction with each other to perform balanced movement on 2 legs. The 3 elements are, first is going to be our upper core muscles that rotate the thoracic spine in the chest. Then we have our lower waist muscles, or our lower abs, that rotate our lumbar spine and pelvis. And that's centered around the belly button and the lower abdominal area. And then we have our hip muscles, which power each movement. Our hips can flex, our hips can extend, our hips can abduct or adduct. But primarily, we use the power of flexion or extension from the hips to create movement. The 8 energies, or the 8 what I call core techniques in the walking code, are the combinations of movement coming from the upper waist, lower waist, and the hip muscles. So why are there only 8 patterns? So let's look at it this way. With our upper waist, we can turn either clockwise or counterclockwise. This is the rotational muscles, primarily the external obliques, that turn the body across to the other side. My external obliques on the right turn the body across to the left. My external obliques on the left turn across to the right. They also flex the spine forward like this, as if we were doing a sit-up. But when we use them correctly on one side or the other side, in conjunction with our lower abs and our hips, it allows us to remain perfectly balanced in a vertical position. So we are using them always in a rotational sense, one side or the other side. If we use both sides together at the same time, that leads to an overuse of the flexion portion of them, which is going to topple the body over forward. The lower abs are also used rotationally. They move in the opposite direction from the upper abs. So they rotate back towards the side where they're active. Left lower abs are going to rotate back on the left. Right lower abs are going to rotate back on the right. They also serve to posteriorly rotate the lumbar spine, or flex the lumbar spine forward, and that pulls the pelvis into a posterior movement. And when we balance our upper waist rotation and flexion of the spine forward with our lower waist rotation and flexion of the lumbar spine upward, they combine to keep us in a perfectly vertical position with a neutral posture. If we use them incorrectly, what happens is other imbalances like slouching or anterior pelvic tilt with a lordotic posture or duck feet, things that don't keep the body lined up. So using the 8 energies in the proper sequence and in the proper proportions allows us to keep vertical posture. So there are 8 techniques because we have only 2 options of waist rotation, upper waist rotation, clockwise, counterclockwise. We have 2 options for lower waist rotation, clockwise, counterclockwise. And then we have 2 options for hip action, because we only power with one hip at a time. We can either power by extending the active hip, or we can power by flexing the active hip. So since we have 2 hips, 2 options each, that is 4 options for hip action. Multiplied by the 4 possibilities of waist rotation, we get 16 possible combinations of movement that involve proper rotation of the upper waist, proper rotation of the lower waist, and proper hip action. Half of those are mirror images, which leaves only 8 options. Those are the 8 energies. And in the walking code, each of those energies has a specific name. And every motion that you're doing, whether you're walking on flat ground, power walking, walking uphill, downhill, upstairs or downstairs, is going to be created by a sequence of those 8 energies, one following the other in a continuous fashion. And so the 8 energies I'm going to go through very quickly. 4 of them are going to be powered by hip flexion. The first one I call set, where we flex the active hip, in this case my right hip, we turn the upper waist towards that hip, and we turn the lower waist or lower abs away from that hip. This is called set, and I call it set because it settles the weight onto one leg. We use this all the time when we're walking. We use it when we place our heel on the ground and begin to shift forward, that is set, powered by flexion of the rear leg hip and waist rotation on the forward side, this side being my right side, before we step. The next movement is going to be sink. In sink, instead of turning the upper waist towards the flexing hip like we do in set, we turn both the upper and lower waist away from the flexing hip. This causes our weight to sink further. You'll notice more knee flexion in sink than you did in set, which is why I call it sink. And sink creates a very nice balance where our spine becomes centered directly over the standing leg, and this is a very evenly balanced position that we use during a lot of activities when we are walking. Then there are two other movements that use the flexion of the hip as the power. The next one is going to be called retreat. Retreat, we have the upper and lower waist turning towards the flexing hip, both at the same time. It causes us to rotate into that flexing hip in this manner. I call it retreat because it also makes us go backwards if we use it in the right sequence. If we shift our weight back to this right leg, and then I turn the upper and lower waist into this flexing hip, it causes me to walk backward or retreat. In Tai Chi, the movement is called roll back, where I flex my forward hip and I turn the upper and lower waist towards that hip, and it causes me to roll back, creating an arm bar sort of defensive movement in Tai Chi. The final movement that uses hip flexion is going to be called lift. Lift is going to lift the body up. Lift uses the waist rotation on one side, so my left side upper waist going clockwise, left side lower waist going counterclockwise, and flexion of the hip on the same side. When we activate these core muscles on the same side, it always triggers extension of the knee on the same side. And I haven't mentioned that part of the code yet, but for each of these patterns of core movement, there is going to be a predictable movement of the knee and the ankle joints that allow the body to remain vertical and upright, because we can't possibly walk around thinking about what we're doing with the knees or the ankles. There's no way we could do that consciously without falling over. So they are automatically connected by our reflexes to the core movement. So our basic standing posture here uses the core technique of lift. Right now, I'm standing with lift on the right side. You can't tell because it looks symmetric, but I can switch over to lift on the left side also. In one of my recent exercise videos I posted, we do this exercise here where we reach forward on one side from the arm, flex this hip here on the opposite side. That's the core technique of set. And then while keeping this hip flexed, I activate the lower abs and upper abs on this side. That pushes the heel into the ground and extends that knee. That is the core technique of lift. That is one of the most important core techniques for walking, because that is what lifts us forward in the swing through phase of gait. After using set, getting the body into the position where your foot is flat, now I lift. Using the core muscles on this right side, it lifts the body forward. That is what creates the swing through phase of gait in a vertical manner, rather than what some people try to do is lean forward and push. So when we're walking in a balanced vertical fashion, we have set and then we have lift. And then we have to put our heel down in a controlled fashion. And when we do that, we're using the core technique I already mentioned of retreat, where the upper and lower waist turn towards the flexing hip. From set, lift, retreat, and then set, lift, retreat, it goes in a sequence. I talk about the mantra on the walking code, turn, tuck, lift, which basically tells you which motions you're going to activate in sequence to make the walking in a forward line happen smoothly. We begin by turning the upper waist to place the heel, tucking the pelvis to bring us through into the set position. This is loading response, and then activating the hip to lift. So turn, tuck, lift is that sequence that gets us the perfect walking technique using the 8 core techniques, or 3 of the 8 core techniques. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you can see more of my videos. And if you're interested in learning the code so you can really advance in your movement technique, go ahead and sign up for the Walking Code online course and pick up the Walking Code book. Both of those will be linked in the description section. Have a great day.